Happy 2025 NFL Draft Week. The Seahawks will be set to pick 18th overall and have 10 selections heading into the festivities in Green Bay. Who will John Schneider reel in to add to his roster? Rob Rang and I are going to be dishing out our final 7-round dueling mock drafts here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang, and a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s who are tuning in. Whether you're down in Sacramento, California, or listening north of the border in British Columbia, we greatly appreciate each and every one of you for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We are now less than 4 days away from the tip of the 2025 NFL Draft in Green Bay. Hayes in the barn. Rob and I are fired up as we do each and every Monday leading up to the draft. We've got our final dueling 7-round mock drafts, each of us having 10 selections, a little different pathways that we got to those picks, but that's what makes it so much fun. We're going to be diving into all 10 of those selections. Look forward to seeing your comments as well on each of our respective drafts, which are going to be brought your way courtesy of our friends at Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Now for your lead story here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Seattle holds the 18th overall selection in the first round heading into Thursday night's draft. And Rob, I don't know how you feel about this. Obviously, you have covered more drafts than what I have to this point, but this may be the most unpredictable first round that Seattle has had leading up to the draft, at least for me, from trying to pinpoint the players that may be candidates for Seattle to pick at number 18. And I think a big reason for that is that while you might not have as many blue chip talents, there are a ton of players that are in that fringe first round, second round grouping. You could argue as many as 40 players could be in that grouping in this year's class. That makes it very difficult to peg who's going to be picked at number 18 and, quite frankly, who's going to be available at that point as well.
Well, that's the biggest thing, Corbin, is that when you are trying to project who a team is going to select when they are drafting 18th overall, obviously it's a lot easier if you know who the first 17 selections are. You know, there's a possibility you're going to see one quarterback go in that first 17 selections. You could see 3 quarterbacks go, and that is going to change absolutely everything. The same with the wide receiver position. You could see 0 wide receivers go. Very few anticipated that no defensive players were going to go before Seattle was on the clock, and actually wound up being the one, of course. But at the same time, again, that is the nature of the NFL draft. So I'll say this. I think that in last year's draft class, I was unable to make any of the correct selections for the Seahawks in terms of who they were going to select the exact player at the exact pick. However, I did project that Seattle was going to take a defensive lineman first, an offensive guard second, a linebacker third. And that is what I anticipate here. I may not get the exact player right. You may not get the exact player right, but we're going to pretty much nail the position groups that the Seahawks obviously need help in, and then throw out some names here that might be good fits at various points of the draft to fill out the shopping list, so to speak, that Mike McDonald and John Schneider have in their preparation for the 2025 NFL Draft.
Yeah, let's get to it. And you and I, look, I think we are in the same ballpark in terms of the types of positions that we think the Seahawks could be in play for. But I handled this draft a little bit differently for my final mock because I listened to John Schneider, what he said last week on his weekly radio show on Seattle Sports. And he kind of hinted at the idea that the Seahawks were going to be a little bit more active in terms of trading. And I don't think the first 10 to 15 picks, you're going to see a lot of movement, but I am starting to believe that there could be, because there's so many different players that are in the same realm, same ballpark in terms of their overall grade in this draft, that after you get past pick 15, there might actually be a significant amount of movement. And John Schneider has draft picks to work with. There's teams behind Seattle that may want to jump 3 or 4 spots to go get their player. And one team to keep an eye on, Jim Harbaugh and the Chargers, Colston Loveland, the tight end who played at Michigan for Jim Harbaugh. If he is still there when the Seahawks are on the clock, I absolutely believe the Chargers are going to be calling John Schneider, if they haven't already called leading up to that point, to position themselves for Colston Loveland. And I think there's a good chance if Seattle's got a handful of guys they really like, that they will do that to try to recoup another pick or do some pick swapping to move from the 3rd into the 2nd round. And that's what I had down. And this is going to surprise some. Those of you that read the article in Emerald City Spectrum already know who I have here, but I decided to go with a pass rusher with the 1st round pick at number 22 overall. After the Seahawks traded down with the Chargers move up to get Colston Loveland. And this is a scenario that I do think there is a good chance it could happen on Thursday night if Loveland has not been picked before that selection, because the 2 teams that are coming behind Seattle, Tampa Bay and Denver, are both teams that are being linked to tight ends in this draft process. So the Chargers at 22 may be thinking that is the latest that we can move up and try to go get our guy and prevent Tampa Bay or Denver from getting him. So in this case, Ezeraku is a player that I've been hearing throughout this process that the Seahawks are excited about. And a lot of people are going to say, well, you just signed DeMarcus Lawrence. You got Boye Mafe, Uchenna Nwosu, Derek Hall. Where's he going to play? Mafe's a free agent after this year. Nwosu has not been healthy for 2 years. DeMarcus Lawrence is 32 going on 33. To me, this is a much bigger need than people realize, both present term and in the future. And Ezeraku, with the leadership, the motor, the bend, the incredible production that he had, the short area quickness, to me, he checks off so many boxes that Mike Macdonald's looking for from tough physical football players. And this is a guy, again, that I've heard the Seahawks have a lot of excitement about. He is going to be on that short list. Does that mean Seattle picks him? We'll have to see. But I think in this scenario, trading down Ezeraku at 22 would make a lot of sense.
No, he would make a lot of sense. I agree. I think the edge rusher is a position of concern for the Seahawks. I actually have Seattle going with the edge rusher with their 2nd selection. So we are viewing this draft very similarly. At the same time, I think that, those who are critical of your selection, saying basically, where is he going to play? Or when is he going to play? I think that they will not feel the same way about the 1st selection that I made for the Seahawks, because let's face it, I mean, everybody has basically been pinpointing the offensive line as a position of concern for the Seahawks this entire draft process. I think that John Schneider, frankly, is sick of hearing about it. And that's why I think that this might be the year where he actually kind of goes to chalk and goes with an offensive lineman. And Kelvin Banks in particular, to me, is really intriguing, Corbin, for the Seahawks. For one, the fact that, and you mentioned the fact that John Schneider and Mike Macdonald had their pre-draft press conference just today. And the Seahawks did not yet commit to the 5-year or the 5th-year rookie contract extension, that 5th-year rookie deal that Charles Cross signed as a 1st-round selection years ago. To me, Kelvin Banks provides you a little bit of flexibility in that regard because he was a 3-year starter at the left tackle position, and so therefore could allow you a little bit of flexibility in the future at left tackle. But in the present, when I think that this is a Seahawks team that to me is gearing up for a playoff run, then you have to address your biggest area of concerns immediately. And that to me would be the left guard position, which feels like a gaping hole right now. Look, Sataya Lauamea may be your left guard of the future. Christian Haynes could be your left guard of the future. Hell, Jaden Sindel could be your left guard of the future. But right now, those are your 3 candidates at left guard. And I think that has the Seahawks fans, and I think that the Seahawks coaches and front office executives a little bit nervous about that. So while I think that Seattle may, in fact, go the direction that you just suggested, go with a defensive player, a trade down, maybe both at the same time. And I hate to kind of make a joke about this, but I do think the investment made in Banks makes sense for the Seahawks because that allows them so much more flexibility the entire rest of the draft. And again, Kelvin Banks is a former left tackle, has that ability. He's 6'5", he's 315 pounds. He's light on his feet. He is a guy that is very effective in the wide zone blocking offense that Clint Kubiak is bringing to the Seahawks. He's not a perfect fit, but at 18 overall, you're not going to get a perfect fit, but you're getting a highly durable player at a position of concern that has never had any type of injury issues or character issues. The level of competition checks all of those boxes, as opposed to some of the other guys out there, like say the North Dakota State guy, Gray Zendel. And to me, there are some concerns out there among some of the other players in this draft class in terms of blockers. To me, of all of the blockers in this class, I think that Kelvin Banks, if he is available at number 18 overall, checks that box. And if Seattle wants to go with a defensive player in the first round and come back, Donovan Jackson in the second round, to me, checks very similar boxes. I just don't think that he is quite as athletic as Banks, and that's why I have Seattle prioritizing Banks. But to me, those are the two offensive linemen that I think absolutely scream Seahawks at this point.
And just so our listeners know, we did separate mock drafts, and Kelvin Banks, Gray Zabel, and Booker from Alabama were all off the board when I was up at pick 18. So if that plays out on Thursday night, that to me just ratchets up the chances Seattle tries to trade down and probably goes to defense. So that's something we got to make sure everybody knows the context with our selections as well. When we come back, we've got the meat of Seattle's draft, day 2, 2 second-round picks, 2 third-round picks. We're going to dive into those in our final dueling mock drafts coming up next here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Did you know your Fire TV is also an Xbox? Turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices. No console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe, or sign in to Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to dive into hundreds of premium titles from EA Sports College Football 25 to Call of Duty Black Ops 6. As easily as you stream your favorite shows, it's gaming made simple, and it's all on your Fire TV. Latest technology allows for elevated playing with Wi-Fi 6, 6E, and auto low latency mode. Fire TV Stick 4K delivers smoother, more responsive gameplay and lightning fast speeds you need to stay competitive. And playing high-quality Xbox games at a fraction of the cost is now attainable. Already have a console, a Fire TV 4K device is more affordable and easier to travel with, allowing you to take you or your kids' games wherever you plug in. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller required. Available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K, 2nd Gen, Fire TV Stick 4K Max, 1st and 2nd Gen, and Fire TV Q 3rd Gen. Welcome back to the Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This is your host, Corbin Smith. He's Rob Rang. A special thanks to each and every one of the 12s that are tuning in. And thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. We are diving into our final dueling mock drafts of the season. Rob and I always have a lot on the line when we're competing with these every year. And we're both looking to do better this year than we did last season at picking some actual players to go to certain spots to the Seahawks. And so far in the first round, Rob getting Kelvin Banks Jr., the tackle, potentially a guard in the NFL from Texas. I drafted Donovan Ezuraku at pick 22 after trading down 4 slots with the Chargers, the uber athletic, productive edge rusher from Boston College. Let's get to our day 2 selections. And thanks to the DK Metcalf and Geno Smith trades, the Seahawks now have 4 of them, 2 second-rounders and 2 third-rounders. And Rob, let's start with your second-round picks. And as you kind of hinted at earlier, I went with an edge at pick 22. You have your sights on attacking that potential need early on day 2.
Yeah, and that's the thing is that, again, I went the offensive line and then an edge rusher. You went edge rusher, and then I believe you'll likely be focusing on an offensive lineman here soon. The edge rusher that I think that the Seahawks are very much going to have their eye on if they were to wait until day 2, number 50 overall, Olufemi Oladejo from UCLA. Obviously, you're going to have 2 Olus on the team, and that might be a little bit confusing for some. Well, that's good because he goes by Femi rather than Olu or Oluwafemi. But UCLA's edge rusher is a really intriguing guy. 6'3", 260 pounds. He is physical. He is fast off the edge. He's a former off-ball linebacker. I think that type of positional versatility could intrigue the Seahawks as early as the first round. As you mentioned with Ezraku, I think that Jahad Campbell could be somebody that the Seahawks are intrigued by because, again, they have athletic ability and they have versatility, something that Mike McDonald is going to be very intrigued by. But for me, Oladejo from UCLA is a guy that just strikes so many of the boxes that the Seahawks are looking for in terms of edge rusher because he has length, he has speed, he has violence in his game, and he also has a great deal of untapped potential. I think he can be absolute steal here for Vanderbilt, number 50 overall.
Yeah, for my first second-round selection, as you mentioned, you and I just kind of did a flipperoo here, and I've talked about this throughout the pre-draft process. I think that interior offensive line for this draft class, the sweet spot is in this early to mid second round. And that is where you're going to see players like Donovan Jackson, potentially Wyatt Milam if he's sliding into guard, Tate Ratledge from Georgia. And I'm actually of the belief going into Friday, because this would be day 2 in the draft, depending on how things play out on Thursday night in the first round. But I think Donovan Jackson, he might be gone in round 1 potentially. And if he's still on the board, he's going to be one of the first couple picks in round 2. Unless the Seahawks are going to move up that far, I don't see Donovan Jackson being there. And I think Tate Ratledge in the late 40s, that is about the sweet spot for him. So I'm looking at the Atlanta Falcons, who go into this draft with just 5 picks. And Atlanta had to mortgage to go up and get a few players the last couple of drafts. They need picks. And I think 46 overall, Seattle trades pick 137, their 4th rounder, and they move from pick 50 up to 46. They get their guy in Tate Ratledge, who I think is going to be the second guard off the board on day 2. To me, that 45 to 48 range is going to be the sweet spot. Can the Seahawks get to that position? I think Atlanta is the team to look at because they don't have very many draft picks. But Tate Ratledge at pick number 46 on a trade up. So I've already got 2 trades. And listen, this is what I think is going to happen Thursday, Friday. I don't know as much on Saturday, but those first 2 days, I do think that John Schneider is going to be playing with a little bit of monopoly money because he's got a lot of picks to work with. And I think he's going to be trying to bounce up and down this draft board, making moves. As for my other second-round pick, I finally stayed put at pick 52. And again, I don't know that this kid is going to be there at this selection, but in my mock draft, he was. And that's Jaden Higgins, the 6'4" wideout from Iowa State. Big play threat downfield, can win in the short to intermediate game, an excellent run blocker at the receiver position, high football IQ, high character player coming from Iowa State. Fills some of the void left behind with DK Metcalf going to Pittsburgh. I do not see Teteroa McMillan getting to the Seahawks at pick 18. He didn't even get to the top 12 in the mock draft that I did. And I think there's a good chance he's gone in those first 12 picks. So if you're wanting that big bodied receiver, Higgins may be the best, most realistic bet to get with one of those 2 picks in the second round. So I've got Seattle tabbing him at pick number 52.
Yeah, which makes an awful lot of sense. I mean, the Seahawks need speed, and Higgins has that. I think that Jalen Royals, the wide receiver that I have them selecting number 52 overall, also possesses that. He's got a better track record of making guys miss after the catch than Jaden Higgins. As much as I like Higgins, as well as his teammate Noel from Iowa State, to me, those are 2 dynamic pass catchers that are very much going to be in play for the Seahawks. You know, Jalen Royals is a player that I think has been kind of slept on throughout this process. If he had an SEC, sticker on the back of his helmet, then I think the people would be an awful lot more excited about him. Obviously, the Seahawks have had a great deal of success out of Utah State in the past, Bobby Wagner, Robert Turbin, and so I do think that they will be a little bit more willing to invest a day 2 selection in a small school player as opposed to maybe a day 1 selection. Again, I mentioned Gray Zabel before. It is a guy that I'm very intrigued by, but in the 15 years that John Schneider has been leading the Seahawks the draft selections, they have not yet ever invested a top 100 selection in a small school player, FCS level player. And so that's one of the reasons why I struggle with that idea. And I kind of go back here that they have won big with the Mountain West Conference and the MAX, the WAX back in the old days. I mean, they have won big with there. And to me, Jalen Royals has the ability as a receiver, a 4.3 guy on some watches, easily 4.4. And his production speaks for itself as both a receiver and as a return guy. He, to me, checks an awful lot of boxes. The Seahawks have size at wide receiver. They just lack speed. And that, to me, is one of the areas in which Jalen Royals could be successful. I'll jump in with my third-round selections. I have the Seahawks not making any trades here. I think that you make a good point as to why Seattle might be making some of these moves. I just don't think that you have to. I think that this draft sets up very nicely to fill their biggest areas of concern, which I would argue is offensive line, edge rusher, wide receiver, and then some depth on the defensive line, cornerback, and linebacker classes. And so I'm going to go with the defensive line as well as cornerback with these next 2 picks here in the third round. Number 82 overall, Ty Robinson. There's an awful lot of us, Corbin. We talked so much about Ty Robinson throughout this entire draft process, and we're not the only ones. Ty Robinson is a guy that's easy to fall in love with. He's 6'6". He's 285 pounds. He's got a very similar size and style as Roy Robertson Harris, as well as Mike Morris, in that he can play that 5 technique outside defensive end role. He can move inside to play defensive end. To play defensive tackle, excuse me. He actually is also a fullback and is a punishing one at that, is a lead blocking role that he played for Nebraska this past season. So I'm really excited about Ty Robinson. This would be perceived by some as a bit of a reach. I don't think it is at all. I think that his physicality absolutely is something that the Seahawks prioritize. And again, the positional versatility, the durability that we talked about before with some of the other selections. And then Quincy Riley, the cornerback from Louisville. Look, if you're going to be joining a cornerback room that has the talent and just the smack talking, let's be real, that the Seahawks already have there, you got to have somebody who's got some ball skills to him. And Quincy Riley has that. 15 career interceptions. That's the most of any of the cornerbacks in this draft class, including guys like a Travis Hunter or a Will Johnson, the so-called blue chip prospects of this draft class. Quincy Riley is a man-to-man corner. You have some questions about his physicality in terms of run support, but at the same time, I think at this point, the big playability justifies the selection. I think that he can improve in that regard, and I do think that he fits in with exactly what the Seahawks are looking for in terms of guys that can make big plays in this back end.
You might not be doing any trades, but I'm going with Trader John. I'm bringing 2019 Trader John back into play here because, again, I think this is a draft class that the more that I've looked into it, after the first 15 picks and then on day 2, I expect there's going to be a fair amount of movement. John Schneider's going to take part of that. And part of the deal with the Chargers, and I mentioned it was a pick swap instead of adding an extra selection. They traded 92, which they got in the Geno Smith trade, and the Chargers gave the Seahawks 55. So they went from a third rounder to a second rounder. So the Seahawks were back on the board at 55. But John Schneider views this as an opportunity, and this would not be abnormal. He has done this several times in the past. Move down from that additional second-round pick to the first pick in the third round, pick 65, and recoups a seventh-round pick as part of the deal with the New York Giants, who move up to get a key receiver to add to their lineup. Seattle didn't need a receiver after picking Jaden Higgins. And with that selection, this might be the pick I am most fired up about because in Clint Kubiak's offense, I just think Harold Fannin Jr. from Bowling Green, this guy is absolutely incredible with the football in his hands. He forced almost 40 missed tackles last year for Bowling Green, over 1,500 receiving yards, 10 receiving touchdowns. He led all tight ends in both categories. And Rob, this is crazy. He had over 800 yards produced after the catch. And he didn't just do this damage against MAC teams, Penn State gave up a 65-yard touchdown that he broke 4 tackles on. And he's 241 pounds, so he's not a prototypical tight end build, but as a move blocker, he is excellent in space. And I think in this offense, Clint Kubiak's going to put him in the slot. He's going to make him an H-back. And oh, by the way, he has 34 carries in his college career too. He's built kind of like a tall running back. Put him at fullback when you need that second back in there, and think of the fun stuff you can do. He had really good run blocking grades. You're not going to put him in line very often because he's not built to do that, but he can do the zone blocking as a move blocker, kind of that joker tight end. This guy has a chance to come in and immediately and maybe be your second best receiver in terms of yardage and receptions right away. He's that good of a player. Some teams aren't going to see a scheme fit. I think Clint Kubiak is. So I have him coming to the Seahawks at pick 65. And staying with the other selection, pick 82 in the third round, I'm going with corner just as you did. Dorian Strong doesn't have quite the ball production numbers that Quincy Riley does, but he is a much better run defender, and he comes up and hits people. He's a physical presence. He's got his hand on a lot of pass breakups, so he's still got good ball production. And I think this is a kid that is still just scratching the surface of his potential. He's bigger than Riley, 6'2", almost 200 pounds. To me, this guy is a tough-minded guy that would really fit what Mike McDonald's looking for in the secondary and could potentially come in right away and beat out Josh Jobe for that other cornerback spot as a third-round selection. When we come back, Rob, I can't believe I'm saying this, but we've got 5 picks apiece left to make here in our final dueling mock drafts, rounds 4 through 7. We're going to get to those coming up next here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. The Armada Player of the Week is brought to you by our friends over at Nissan and the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Each week, we're taking a look at our draft prospects to pick one guy that stands apart, the guy we believe showcased the strength and power needed to push the Seahawks forward as we look towards next season. This week's Armada and clear-cut Player of the Week is Jihad Campbell, a playmaking linebacker from Alabama with a well-rounded skill set who dominated the best competition in college football in the SEC. He's a pass rusher and a run defender. Campbell offers the heavy-duty toughness and confidence that comes with the all-new Nissan Armada. When it comes to the Nissan Armada, they say go forth and conquer, and that's exactly why I think Jihad Campbell can do that for the Seahawks. It's clear our Player of the Week is out here ready to conquer the road ahead with confidence, just like you can in the all-new Nissan Armada or any of their outstanding vehicles. Take the Nissan Armada, Rogue, or Pathfinder and go find your next adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com today. Welcome back to the Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined as always by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s out there. Thank you as always for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. We are now heading to day 3 of our final dueling mock drafts, rounds 4 through 7. This is where championship teams are built. The 4th round through the 7th round, you're looking to hit on as many of these picks as you can. Maybe find a few starters down the line, a few quality reserves, special teams standouts. This is where you build those final pieces for your championship team. Rob, let's go to the 4th round. And you did not make any trades like I did, so you still got the native selection at 137 for the Seahawks. I have picked the first selection of the 4th round, or third pick. It's actually the 3rd pick in the 4th round. I had the first pick in the 3rd round with one of my trade downs. But with the Giants, I have the 3rd pick in the 4th round. So you and I both do have a 4th round selection, and both of us have 172 and 175 in the 5th round. A great opportunity to land some talent early on day 3.
Yeah, and this is where it usually becomes a little bit easier to kind of pinpoint some of the Seahawks needs and who are some of the schematic fits. A couple of years ago, I got Cameron Young, the defensive lineman from Mississippi State. While he has been, disappointing, frankly, for the Seahawks at this point due to injuries, still, he was a schematic fit. Kind of plugged him in here for the Seahawks a couple of years ago. Tyrese Knight, the linebacker, plugged him in accurately in a mock draft for the Seahawks.com, a year ago. So I do feel confident that between you and I, Corbin, we are going to be able to get at least one of these next selections. So without any further ado, I'll just kind of jump in. With the number 4, or the 4th fourth round selection the Seahawks have, currently number 137 overall. I think that they are going to be looking for another type of defensive lineman. And then Seahawks fans might be disappointed in that idea that I'd have them taking 2 defensive linemen before they get to 2 offensive linemen. But I do think that that is the strength of this year's draft class. I mentioned before, Ty Robinson, 6'6", 285 pounds. He fits in best on the perimeter. Now you need a nose guard, be able to take over for Jonathan Hankins because the aforementioned Cameron Young has not been as effective. Jay Toia from UCLA is one of my favorite nose guards in this class. Look, he is not a sack guy. He has 3 sacks over his last 3 seasons for UCLA. But at the same time, at 6'2", 342 pounds, he is one of the absolute stone walls at the point of attack that I think that the Seahawks are looking for. So to me, Toia, the 3-year starter with the Bruins, would make an awful lot of sense. And I'll just jump in here with my 2 fifth-round selections really quickly. Marquise Siegel, and I love the fact that his name is pronounced Siegel with the Seahawks, but it's more than just the wordplay here. This is a guy that has corner and safety versatility. He ran in the 4.3s at the combine, so the fact that he began his college career at North Dakota State before he went to Kansas State and became a starter at the safety position, to me is more intriguing than the fact that, again, his name is pronounced Siegel. And then I would mention C.J. Dupree, a tight end. You mentioned a tight end before in Harold Fannin from Bowling Green. Dupree is the exact opposite of Harold Fannin. Harold Fannin is that H-back. He is a guy that can be an absolute star in Clint Kubiak's offense if they want to throw the ball to a rookie. I think that they're going to want to throw the ball to Noah Fant and A.J. Bonner. I think both of them are a little bit underrated by a lot of Seahawks fans, frankly. But I do believe that the Seahawks need to add a little bit more punch to the tight end position, but a little bit more power. Something that they were hoping that they were going to get out of Pharaoh Brown, but he was a ghost, so to speak, as far as being a physical blocker at the point of attack. C.J. Dupree is not that. I think that he can provide you a little bit more pop at the point of attack, and that is something that I think the Seahawks absolutely need at tight end. Dupree is one of my favorites in this draft class in terms of providing that type of oomph at the point of attack. And again, that's why I think that he would be a good value selection in the 5th round, as opposed to, say, an early round selection with the tight end.
Yeah, those are really good selections, and it just depends on what flavor you're looking for at tight end. And I do think there's a chance Seattle waits till later and gets a blocking tight end. But if Harold Fannin is there in the 3rd round, I think that is absolutely going to be something the Seahawks are looking at because of the playmaking ability and the fact I think he can play fullback. As far as the directions that I went, as I mentioned, I've got a much earlier 4th round pick because that was part of my last trade that I made with the New York Giants moving down. And you move down 55 to 65, you get good value there with pick 101 and also adding a late 7th round pick as part of this trade down too. I went with a defensive tackle, and this is the first time I've done that in this draft. Unlike you, I addressed other position needs up to this point just because that's the way that the draft board fell. But if CJ West is there early in the 4th round, this is an absolute slam dunk. And I think that it's going to be difficult to get him in the 4th round at this point based on what I have been hearing. Teams are very high on this kid, and I understand why. He is not the biggest guy at 315 pounds, but he's 6'1", 315. He has vicious hands. I call him meat cleavers because he just seems like he cuts through guards when he throws his hands at them. And he's incredibly difficult to move. He plays with great leverage. And he's also really good at the knee drop move as well, which a lot of your great nose tackles excel at that. He is dominant at that. Notre Dame tried to run at him in the college football playoff, and they simply could not. When they ran away from him, they had success. But if they ran anywhere near CJ West, it was game over. He stuffed the line of scrimmage. He's got some pass rushing ability. He's got athleticism. This is your modern nose that can move around some. And I like the fit for CJ West. You get him early in the 4th round. This guy has a chance to play, even in this defensive line, have a snap workload that's pretty heavy his first year, particularly at the nose tackle spot. And as far as my 5th round selections, I went with a tight end, a 2nd one here. And the reason I doubled down to the tight end position is you mentioned blocking remains an area of concern for the Seahawks there. And Noah Fant's going to be a free agent. This, to me, was a value pick at this point. Jalen Conyers has been a special teams player throughout his college career. He can play special teams. He has improved as a blocker. He's 260 pounds. You can play him in line. You can't do that with Harold Fannin. And he's another guy that I think you could drop into the fullback if he wanted. He actually has played some Wildcat quarterback before, previously at Arizona State. So this is one of those where I am taking advantage of a deep tight end class. Let's get two of them that are much different style players, but they both can do damage in the passing game. They're just different athletes, and they're different players the way they handle themselves. And getting my second offensive lineman at pick 175, this is not a good center class, but if there's a guy on day 3 that I think you could move to center, he's already proven he can play there. Just ask Ohio State. Addison West had a great game for Western Michigan when he had to move to center on an emergency basis. He's very athletic, one of the best zone blockers in college football. Late 5th round, this guy I'm moving to center and having him compete right away with Jalen Sundell and Oluwatimi, a guy that I think can come in this scheme, and he can push those guys, if not eventually overtake them, and be a starter down the line as an All-American at Western Michigan.
Yeah, those are bold words, and but I agree with you. He did make some splash plays against Ohio State. If you're going to make splash plays, do against national champions, then that is going to create some interest. I'll mention a couple of other guys that, again, I think that the fact that they raised their level of play late in their college careers, and I think it's going to spark some interest. Both of these players are out west. Ricky White III, wide receiver from UNLV. Now, long-time Locked On Seahawks listeners will remember Ricky White. I talked about him before, and thank you, as Corbin often says, thank you so much to all of our listeners and supporters. We do very, very much appreciate it. With Ricky White, we're talking about a player who began his college career at Michigan State, and, say what you will about Michigan State. I mean, they had a guy in Keon Coleman, wound up going to Florida State, wound up being a second-round selection by the Buffalo Bills, was pretty productive as a rookie for the Buffalo Bills this past season. Ricky White III goes to UNLV, Corbin, and all he does is basically rewrite the UNLV record books at the wide receiver position. Then he runs a 4.6, and I think that that's going to take him off of a lot of NFL teams' boards. But the Seahawks, as we talked about, the Seahawks have one of the slower wide receiver cores throughout the NFL. And my conversations with Seahawks scouts is that they don't seem that concerned about that fact. They're looking more for quickness. They're looking for sure hands. They're looking for big play ability after the catch. Ricky White III can absolutely do that. He's got special teams ability, not as a return man, as I mentioned before, with Jalen Royals from Utah State. Ricky White III is a physical player that wants to block people. And I think that fits in with the offense as well as on special teams. Another physical special teams kind of savant would be Carson Bruner, the linebacker from the University of Washington. Yeah. He only started one season at UW. But at the same time, he was very productive throughout his entire career. A lot of that was on special teams. He's very instinctive. He's sneaky athletic as well. And I have some concerns about the depth of the inside linebacker position. So to me, the late round selection of a local prospect, he feels like his best football is still kind of ahead of him. I think absolutely screams Seahawks at this point in the draft.
Yeah, for my last 2 selections, they're both in the 7th round as well. I just retooled a little bit. I did trade one of my 7th rounders as part of one of my trade downs earlier, but I still have 2 of them getting pick 246 from the Giants in the last trade. And for my 2 selections, I'm looking at this from 2 different point of views here. Curtis Rourke is a player we've talked about a lot on this show, Rob. And I'll admit I'm a huge fan of him. I loved the way he played this year. And why wouldn't you be? He 29 touchdown passes and just 5 interceptions. Indiana, which has been a perennial bottom feeder in the Big Ten for like a century, they went to the college football playoff in his first year, and he did all this with a torn ACL. He played with a torn ACL. To me, he has a lot of the tools that we have seen quarterbacks thrive in Clint Kubiak's offense with. He's got the quick release, very cerebral, smart quarterback, understands how to read defenses. When he's healthy, he moves fairly well. That was not the case this year. Now we know why he was not moving well. Playing with a torn ACL. But this guy has all of the tools that you're looking for, and John Schneider's talked about it. I don't think even adding Drew Lock is going to stop them from drafting a QB. If the board falls right, this is a guy coming off ACL surgery that you can redshirt this year, and maybe you can put him on injured reserve or whatever, but you can have him on the injury front so nobody else can take him from you. You can still develop him behind the scenes. And I think there is still potentially a guy there that could push Drew Lock or Sam Darnold down the line in this offense. The 7th round, this is the time to take advantage of a player that's much better than a 7th rounder, but he's going to fall there because of the injury situation. And in the secondary, Seattle needs a 3rd safety after losing Rayshawn Jenkins and Kayvon Wallace. Maxon Hook is a player from Toledo that I think can come in and maybe battle for early 3rd safety snaps on defense right away because he's experienced. He played a lot of snaps at Toledo. He's played good football against Power 4 schools. He's played both safety positions. He can blitz. He can tackle. He cut his tackle misses to under 7% each of the last 2 years. He's a hard-nosed guy that practices hard, and he's going to bring all the effort off the field, putting the study time in as well. He, to me, is a Mike McDonald-type safety that has some similarities to Kobe Bryant playing that safety position that I think would make a lot of sense for the Seahawks with their Mr. Irrelevant, their last selection in the 7th round. As always, you can follow me on X and Blue Sky at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Rob at Rob Rang. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. When we come back tomorrow, we're going to be taking a dive into some potential trade up and trade down opportunities, and then we're going to spin the wheel and look at some potential targets in the 1st round. We're going to have a couple of big boards with who's available at 18, and Rob and I are going to debate who the Seahawks should take under those various circumstances. It's going to be a really fun show. Make sure you listen in and enjoy the rest of your Monday. Go Hawks.